Okay, we are here back with the Steve Mazzacane podcast. As I joke every time, I'm Steve Mazzacane. This is part two of our gifting table. I don't want to call it the Gifting Tables podcast because it's really just about you for the most part. I mean, we're talking about the gifting tables, but I'm here with Jill Platt, who was, if you listen to the first one, you know who she is. But I appreciate you being here and telling this story. As I've said to you before, I'm fascinated by this story for a lot of reasons.
It's crazy.
It's an amazing story. And what happens so often with news is that we read articles from a distance, and the people aren't real people.
Right.
They were just this evil person or whatever it was. And we read it, and the comments on social media are how awful this is, whatever. And then different things emerge when we start meeting the people behind the story and the headline. And so I appreciate this look into your experience and the gifting tables and what happened to you. We've talked about what led you up to, we'll say, the first day of court.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you, on a personal level, lost your husband and mother, and this issue started over a 6-month period.
Yeah, I was arrested in May, and now in January, the selection of the jury begins.
Let's talk about trial. Your attorney, you're two of you here, two different attorneys. Norm Pattis is one of them, and he's certainly entertaining. What were your thoughts? Did you think this was going to be... was there a point during this trial where you said, I'm in trouble? Or was there a point during this trial that you thought, no, this is not going to be a big deal? What were your thoughts during this trial?
I felt really pretty decent about everything. I was very popular with the women. Because I gave of myself, but to people who weren't on my tables, if they wanted me to talk to somebody, I talked to them. I would drive places for coffee with, we call it having a coffee. We never invited anybody to a party after the miser person without being interviewed first. And they had to know everything about it before they came, so that we didn't have to get people up there and then quoting the tax thing again, and then somebody explaining how it worked. That was done on a one-to-one basis.
And that was after, once these questions started, you said, okay, let's be more proactive.
Right.
Susan Miser was the writer for the Register.
Right.
Who was also either moonlighting as a babysitter of another member.
I think she had been a babysitter for a neighbor prior to going to college.
Okay.
And then when she got out of college and reconnected with her neighbor, she had a goal to get into a party. Now, how, I don't know their situation or how it even got
to that
brought
point,
up.
but
so
somehow she got in.
Yep.
And she tried to get into another one, but was not allowed.
Yes, she approached another very large group in Guilford with a platter of appetizers, and they didn't recognize her. They asked her who invited her, and she gave a name, and they said, I'm sorry, she's not in this group. Goodbye. Yep. And so she was turned away.
I mean, a girl shows up at my door with a platter of food, I'm letting her in. So I kind of give her that that's going to happen. Okay, so this article comes out. All of these things happen over over a 6-7 month period. You're going through trial. Your thought process when the defense wraps up is you think you're in pretty good shape.
I thought we were in great shape. The defense tried to invite everybody that they knew of on the gifting tables, and then there were some that refused to go, and they said, if you subpoena me, and I know that's one person, that if you subpoena me, you will not be happy with my testimony. So they didn't subpoena her, but the IRS did threaten her because her husband owned a business here in Branford, threatened to audit her husband for the rest of his life every year.
So at this point, even witnesses that you wanted to bring up were hesitant to come up.
Not necessarily. We put one witness on the stand, and the prosecutor came out with some really damaging emails that my co-defendant had written.
Okay.
She had gone through a massive depression at the time she was writing these. People were constantly asking her for her help on something, and she was like, get off my back kind of thing, or, you need to get moving or whatever it is. But, they were very unattractive emails. And our attorneys got together and said, every person we put up there they're going to be bringing up these damaging emails that make her sound like a real witch,
I mean, I have some of those here.
And I'm trying not to swear, so this is a challenge for
I don't
me.
mind if you do. It's not the end of the world. I mean, as long as we're not blatant about it. I've already gotten lectured in the past on, if
something could slip out here. Is all I'm saying.
If we swear too much, this has to be air after 9 o'clock on BCTV, but our podcast can still air. Some of these emails. One of them was, it's sort of a joke that I referred to our freezer as an ATM.
Me, yeah. I said that.
You said that.
I said that.
Here's another one from your co-defendant. They have had enough and we're leaving some names out because I didn't, this is, again, your story.
Right.
I don't want to raise that, but people can do what they need to do with that. They have had enough parties. It's costing us a small fortune in their food and wine delights. No more parties until they commit with cash.
Yeah, that would be my co-defendant.
There's another one here. There's an email that said, I am not a saint. I'm teaching you all how to make 80 grand a year. Isn't that enough?
That would be her.
I could see that being very damaging.
Yes.
Like, this is...
See, my damaging email was, we jokingly refer to our freezer as an ATM. Because...
I could see that, yeah.
My husband loved that, by the way.
I could imagine. I mean, listen, if I have a magical freezer that pulls cash out, I'd be in favor of that, too.
It was really fun.
But you can see how somebody could say, listen, they're gifts, but there's reference to earning money here. So, we could make $80,000 a year is a terrible way to say something if you're trying to say it's just a gift.
Yeah, she broke the magic the magic words rule.
Here's another one. As women, we like our own stash, keep it in a safe, keep it quiet because rather not have red flags raised. Hiring accountants and attorneys is costly. So we have, this is the press release from the United States Attorney's Office. And at the end of this, the jury comes back with their verdict. And you're guilty. You end up with, what is your reaction when you hear 54 months of imprisonment?
It's mind-boggling. I was in a brain fog for the whole thing. And I'm thinking, well, again, I was a good witness. So this is part of my thinking process here is...
You were a good witness as in Jehovah's Witness. Like you didn't want to lie.
I can't lie.
Okay.
I still don't, by the way. That stuck.
I appreciate that.
But I think I was always that way, but, really, really stuck. I was always a spiritual child, just my nature. Anyway, gosh, I lost my train of thought.
Well, you were in a brain fog for this trial.
Yes, I was in a brain fog, but that's not where I was going. It had to do with the... Gosh, could we rewind and find out what we were talking about?
We said, so you're standing there and they tell you your sentencing is 54 months.
Okay, yes. So biblically, I know that we have had people go into prison that were totally innocent.
Yes, that's true.
And there was a reason that they were there.
So at this point, you're thinking there's kind of like a higher calling thing.
Yes.
You're going to save some lives
so
in prison.
I'm going in there, but I also know, by the time we have our sentencing, we were prepared to hire more attorneys for the appeal.
Okay.
So the judge refused to let us have a stay. We had to go into prison. But after almost 7 months, the appellate court read our brief, because we finally got that to them, and they ordered our release, immediate release, which the probation department had never seen before. So the appellate court was really unhappy about our sentences. I think they were unhappy about the verdict. And I did get to go to New York City where the appellate court reviewed the whole thing. And it was, again, like watching a TV show. And there's in the play Chicago, there's a time where they're like shooting at the guy's feet and he's doing a song and dance.
Yep.
That was the defendant. I mean, the prosecuting attorney. He was acting like they were shooting bullets right at his life. He was doing the song and dance of his life. And the three judges that were questioning him, they were obviously unhappy with everything that happened to us. Unfortunately, they can't vacate anything. They have to find the flaw in the sentencing, which they decided was the amount that we were charged with for restitution, I think. And I'm not sure what that enormous, so it's like $500,000 or something. It was an enormous amount of money. And we had to go back to the same judge to be resentenced. Now, the same judge is like totally pissed off that he's been found to have a flaw. So just
to go back a little, they decide the months that you're given in jail is based on the amount of money they say that you did.
Yes.
Then you go back and you start getting other people in the gifting tables to sign documents saying,
nope,
we were not part of this, we're not part of it. And so
I have no problem.
The total amount
got down to $85,000.
So from whatever it was to begin with that led to 54 months, you're down to $85,000.
They said I was not taken advantage of. I was not pressured. I did everything. It was of my free will. And in the end, there was the restitution was $32,500 to be split between me and my co-conspirator.
But that also greatly reduced what your sentence was.
Well, if he used the same exact formula that he used to sentence us, I would have had 6 months. So I'd already served it. Okay. So my attorney said, listen, since this has happened, 3 years had passed. For 3 years, we were working with the prosecuting attorney to try to come up with some kind of recommendation. And the prosecuting attorney finally, said that he would indict everybody if we got anybody else to sign a waiver here.
Okay.
And he would be great if we had a 2-year sentence. Basically, he was looking for that. But the judge was so angry that when my attorney got up and said, well, we feel that Mrs. Platt has gone through quite a bit. She had just lost her son. Mm-hmm. I had a son. Chris's younger brother died. And, she's lost her husband, her mother, now her son. And the judge said, when we reach a certain age, we expect these things to happen. And I wanted to say, oh, really? Do you have any kids that have died? Because I don't think there's a parent out there that thinks that they expect that to happen. They don't. And it's hard to live with. It's a very, 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 that's like the worst. Anyway, I digress.
It's okay.
The judge took 2 years off of my sentence and 2 years off of my co-defendant's sentence. So she had a 6-year sentence to begin with and still had a 4-year sentence at the end of all this because she was deemed the kingpin, But the other woman who had pleaded guilty had more points against her than I had, and she got probation. So there's what's called a trial tax. If you dare defend yourself, if you dare believe in yourself, you will be penalized for it very, very severely.
Well, I think, most of the times the prosecutor comes at you and says, I'm going to offer this now if you take it now. If you don't take it and goes to trial, you're not going to, we're going to go after it much harder. It's unfortunate, but I think without that, you'd have so many trials. Everything in the world would go to trial. But look,
there's a significant difference from a 2-year probation or a 1-year probation to 4.5 years in prison, right? And 3 years probation on top of that.
So you are in the courtroom. You have these guilty verdicts on these 3 charges. You are then sentenced to 54 months, and even though you're going to appeal, they don't stay the sentence. You're going to jail.
Right. And by the way, we call that prison. If it's federal, it's prison.
You're going to prison. Okay. Talk to me about that process.
We are elitists.
What is that like? What is the first day?
Oh, my gosh. So at the time, Danbury wasn't available. They were turning the prison into a men's prison, and they were bringing the women down to this camp that had been designed for the 12 Watergate guys. So we were sent to Alderson, West Virginia, which is a trek. Mm-hmm. And it's a big prison. I think we had about 1,200 women there at the time. And it was the first federal prison ever made for women. Eleanor Roosevelt had it made, and it was beautiful. It was set up to be like a college campus, Georgian-style buildings, and with a green in the center, big quad. And so we get there. We're at the bottom of the hill. It's a very hilly area, West Virginia. And this bread truck comes down. Not really bread, but you know what it looks like. and the two of us get into the back of the bread truck. There are no safety issues here. I mean, the back is open, or it opened up while we're there, and they're going up the hill, and we're like, we're going to slide right out of this thing. And they bring us up to the R&D area, and a good friend of mine, a fellow witness, had gone to her psychologist and asked for different things that she could teach me for stress, right? And so she taught me the tapping method.
Yeah.
So when you're stressed, you just keep tapping, and then little by little, the stress kind of goes away. So now I'm teaching the stress management to my co-defendant and these three other women
that are in this red
that are here, and it just happened that we're all older white women. Right, I'm always the oldest. I'm always the oldest, but we were all older white women, and from New York and Connecticut. One from Kentucky, and we called ourselves the Fab Five. And I was like the leader of the gang all the time because I follow maps and they don't. And where are we going? And we've got to go down to Psych now. So, it's down the hill and we got to take a left over here. It's a big campus. So our first day there was very strange because I saw somebody looking through the window and the door as we're all sitting there like like this.
Yeah, 5 older white women tapping their heads.
They're all tapping, right? My co-defendant was punching herself, but we were all tapping. And then they give us they process each one of us. They give us a sack with towels and sheets and basic things for the day one because you have nothing. If you have a prescription, they take it from you. You have nothing.
Okay.
And then they just throw it in the trash can, your prescription. You don't have fibromyalgia. It's okay. Then we have to walk up what they called Hallelujah Hill. And it was called Hallelujah Hill because you did say hallelujah when you finished, and you were also at the church. So if you weren't in good shape, you had to stop because it was hard to climb that hill. And I was very proud of myself that I made it up there. And then we went across the quad into the second floor of the A building, as A3 is our unit. So there were 8 units altogether, the A building and the B building, and we have 2 units on the bottom, 2 units on the second floor, no air conditioning. And they started all the newbies in that one unit. And they had mentors in that unit. So it was really the best of the spaces you could ever be in.
Okay.
Because the animals had already been weeded out. So this is where the mentors...
Was this minimum security?
This is camp.
Okay.
This is camp. They actually did have a fence there. Unlike Danbury, we didn't even have a fence in Danbury.
Oh, okay.
Right. But yeah, minimum security. And when I got there, I actually fixed the notebook with tabs on it. I folded paper so my co-conspirator could see the different subject matters so that she could figure out where, because she had serious ADD and they took her ADD meds from her. And now she's like, I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where. So I was like, okay, I'm going to make it. I fix it for you. So she calmed down right away as soon as she could see. Everything made sense, right? They started us off in what they call the bus stop. The bus stop is a section that is supposed to be for tables, for like playing cards or something in the front of the unit. But they threw all these bunk beds in there so they could have 20 more beds.
A bit more space, yeah.
Yeah, even though it was against the fire laws, they would rather pay the fine because they made more money that way. So the unit, and then they had 3 television rooms that they turned into, which we called fish bowls. They turned into more bedrooms, right? So we ended up being overcrowded significantly. And you have 2 bathrooms with each had, I think, 4 showers. And you had to wait in line a long time to get to a shower. So you really try to figure out when you really needed the shower.
Okay.
And the shower stalls they were like little rooms where you walked in. There was a space where you could change, and then you had the shower, but there was no shower curtain, so everything was wet. So you got to the point, and this is where I usually like to stand up and explain. I don't know if I can do that in your context.
Yeah. We'll lose your microphone, but go ahead a little bit.
Okay. Try to get dressed. And you have a little towel, that you stand on, and then you try using
good
balance.
Yeah.
You need good balance here to do one at a time. And if you drop something, it's in a puddle, and you're like, no,
Yeah, you're not going to.
It's bad. So I think that it improved my balance significantly. I had when I finally got to a cubicle, we have a bunk bed, a desk, and 2 lockers. And then we each get a foot locker. And that everybody had that once they got settled in. And fortunately for me, I got a job working for my unit manager. And the unit manager is the person who decides where every woman in the entire prison is going to go. I didn't realize the power I had
Okay.
until about a month or 2 before I left. Because if anybody had a complaint or if anybody was difficult, and I would be in there in my unit manager's office cleaning or something, and she'd say, how are things in the unit? You know, any problems? And I said, well, we have this one person. She's really, trash. She's saying things that, decent women don't want to hear. And she says, really? What's her name? And I said, I don't know names. She's in 34 lower. I always say 34 lower because that was my bunk. But that afternoon, I'd go out and they would send out these books and you had to check it every night to see if you had a doctor's appointment or, if you had to go anywhere, do anything, or if you were going to be moved to a different unit, the instructions would be in this book. So every night that I said, well, somebody was a problem, that person would be moved out of the unit. And pretty soon, all the women in the unit would come to me and say, this person over here, she's a problem. I said, what's the problem? He said, well, she's exercising in her cube, which is against the rules. But the problem is that she's making a lot of noise, and the woman next to her in the bunk works 3rd shift, and she needs to sleep during the day. And so the next day, I said, well, somebody needs to tell her that she needs to fix that or she'll get voted off the island. And next day, she's gone.
So were you the Vito Corleone of the
I was.
I mean, what was going on?
I was running the unit by the time I left here. That's why I said it's a good thing I didn't figure out the power that I had
early on
until much later. And by the time I left, our unit was really very calm and we were happy people. I did all of the bulletin boards, the artistic stuff, and my skills came in handy that way. As a painter, paper hanger, faux finish person, and my drawing skills improved dramatically. And when I felt that our appeal was going to be read, our brief was going to be read, and we were going to be leaving soon. I mean, I was so positive that I was leaving. I was absolutely positive. My kids were really concerned that it wasn't going to happen, and I was going to be
let down and
devastated,
depressed,
right? Because I had no doubt in my mind. I absolutely had no doubt. My bunkie had been brought up by Jehovah's Witnesses.
Oh, really? Jesus Christ.
But she kind of left the fold, but I was still very much involved. And she said, you don't just talk the talk, you walk the walk. And she was ethnically half black American Indian, and half white. Her white grandfather was a Ku Klux Klan person. And so she was, I would say, a little bit damaged psychologically by this experience. But she recognized that it was her grandmother that made her grandfather accept her and bring her into the family. And so she loved older white women. And so when she came in, she said, I have to say, I'm really happy that I was assigned to have a cube with an older white woman. I said, we're not all good people. Don't get taken in.
So how far along are we now?
We were, okay, so she left in April, and I left in May.
Okay, so this is after, were you like 6 months in jail now? Or?
Yeah, 6 months in 6 months in prison.
Okay.
And this young lady who looked so hard when she came into my cube, she had a bullet wound in her leg, she was soft and different at the end of the 5 months that she spent with me. And she was happy, and which she wasn't like that at all. As a matter of fact, one time when I was in the TV room with my fellow Golden Girl in there, watching a movie, and these women were watching something on TV. I think it was The Real Housewives of Atlanta, and that group of women thought television was interactive, and they would be yelling, and my friend stood up and says, "Ladies," and she had been a college professor. That's another whole story. "Ladies, would you mind keeping it down a little bit so we can hear our movie? Thank you." And she sits down, and I'm looking at her thinking, she's nuts. She's nuts. These people aren't going to listen to that, and they didn't. So when the movie was over, I said, "Jan, there's a part of me that really wants to make a lot of noise now." And she said, "Let's do it." So she gets up and she picks up her chair and drops it. And I said, "No, that's not how we move our chairs," because we had to stack these plastic chairs, right, when we were finished. So I said, "This is how we move our chairs." So I took the chair and I pushed it across the concrete. Makes a lot of noise. And then I stacked it. And when I stacked it, I turned to these ladies and I said, "I thought you'd like to know how much we enjoyed our movie." Well, my bunkie was sitting at the next table. When she hears the women plotting to come in and do me.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. They have this thing they call slocking, where you put your lock in a sock and you can whack somebody. You can really hurt them.
No kidding, yeah.
Oh, yes. And so they were plotting. And she stands up. She's a big girl. And she says, "Hold it right there. No one's coming into our cube and making a mess. And by the way, do you know who she is? Do you know who she works for? They love her. What do you think is going to happen to you if you do something to her?" And they thought about it for a little while, and they decided, well, instead of going to the unit manager, they were going to go to the building manager, who was a black woman, and they thought that the black woman would take their side. What they didn't know is the black woman wanted me to work for her, but I needed to spend more time in the prison before I could transfer to her office.
Okay.
So I was appreciated, because I enjoy working, right? So I would go in there. I rearranged all the furniture.
It sounds like you want to go back.
I said to my son, I said, "What? It's like, this is kind of like going to camp for bad girls. It's like the bad Girl Scout camp, right? So I feel like I'm in camp where I'm roughing it a little bit, but I said, the only thing is I can't have a good cup of coffee." He said, "Mom, when you think that you've made a good cup of coffee, that's when you've been there too long." That's because it's instant coffee with cremora, Anyway, the next day after this event, I went to work, and the secretary in my office says, "Something happened last night."
Oh, they knew about it already? Yeah.
Because these girls went to the building manager. And then that night, all those girls went to a different building.
Oh, really?
Yes, every one of them. And as my bunkie said, I tried to tell them that they like you. They're not going to, they don't care about these big mouth women.
So you're there for 6 months.
Yeah.
This is
nearly caused a race
Virginia.
riot, but
I can see that.
Yep.
You get a call saying the appeals court is going to hear this.
Yes. Yeah, that the appellate court has our brief. They'll be ruling on it soon. And then I get a call that the appellate court has demanded our immediate release.
Okay.
Now, because my co-conspirator and I were processed together, our prison numbers were only one digit different, right? So I knew mine and I knew hers. They were laughing because they needed to fill out all these forms, and I was the person that knew the information and she didn't know the information yet. She was actually in a different unit by then. And so I filled out all of her forms for her as well. I don't even know if she knows that. But they sent us to the Alderson House, which was a house that Martha Stewart had redesigned or refinished when she was there, and it was to serve for the families of the women at Alderson. It was only open on the weekends because that's our visiting hours, and this was like on a Wednesday. So they had to get somebody to open up the house for us because they had to get us out like by 5 o'clock or something. They
So
had
the Alderson house is civilian quarters. It's not
right.
It's not prison. Okay.
Right. So now the two of us go into this house. We were shown around by the person who operates it, maintains it, and then they leave. And we're looking at each other like,
What the
God,
hell?
we're totally we're totally free to do what we want. Look, there's a remote control. We can turn turn on the TV. We sat down on couches. We put our feet up.
Was there a coffee machine?
There. I don't remember coffee
so-
being an issue, but there was a refrigerator that we could open ourselves.
Wow.
Yeah,
All right.
and there were leftover foods in there from the weekend, and we were just like giggly. I mean, it was funny. So we're walking around, and now we have an opportunity to find bedrooms. And we looked at each other. We didn't want to sleep all alone in a room. It was kind of, like, no, we got to find a room with 2 beds.
Yeah.
So we did. And we heard every noise in the house, every creak, everything that was going on, because the prison is so loud with these big fans and everything. You don't hear little creaks and stuff. It's a whole different world. So very loud
Interesting.
atmosphere. Yeah.
So
Our kids came.
they came to the house and visited,
The kids came to pick us up
and you come back up to
to
Connecticut.
Connecticut.
But then you have this court date.
The appellate court
Yeah.
date. Yes, the appellate court date was not for a few more months because we got out in May, and we went to New York, I think in October or November. It was either the end of October or the beginning of November. And
I mean, you both must have been thinking at this point your jail time was done.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I did. I thought, well, it's over, it's over. So I was a bit shocked when we went around the second time, and I still had 2.5 years.
So they gave you a total of, they took off 2 years from 54 months.
Right.
So you had a total of 30 months.
Yes.
You had served 6.
I had served almost 7,
Okay.
and then they sent us to Danbury, and that was another interesting experience. I was in Danbury. I served a total of about 21 months because I went to a halfway house in Florida because I was supposed to live with a friend who had a medical practice, and I was going to become a medical assistant and take care of him and my girlfriend.
So that they would let you out early to learn this, or?
Yes. If you
Okay.
had a bona fide reason to re-educate, So I was given 3 months in the halfway house. I ended up probably doing 4 months in the halfway house and less time in home confinement because I was caught with a smartphone. And I said, listen, I need a smartphone because I don't know Florida and I can't get around unless I have GPS.
So you were in Danbury.
Yeah.
That was a different experience from West Virginia?
Oh, very different.
Worse or better, or?
I would say better. Danbury was hard. It was hard physically in Alderson because you had that frickin' hill, right?
Okay.
Everything was located at the bottom of the hill but your quarters. The quarters were up there. And the library and the church were also up there at the top. And the medical was up there too. But laundry, commissary, all your meals, that was all the base. I can remember the first order from commissary, and I thought, oh, I've got this big thing to lug up the hill. I was grateful for the bench. I could sit there and wait a little bit. And then somebody offered to help me up the hill for the rest of the way. But
So then Danbury, there's
Danbury,
no hills.
Danbury was flat. It had no hills. I worked on grounds for Danbury, so I was the gardener.
Okay.
And I'm a gardener.
Yeah.
So, somebody said, why do you work so hard? And I said, I love gardening. It makes me feel normal to be gardening. And the building manager there said to me, wow, you really left your mark here. So, yeah, I redesigned a bunch of things. And I happened to work for a man who was, he prized himself on being a jerk, but he liked me. And I turned 70 when I was in that prison. So at one point, somebody said to him, do you have any idea how old she is? And he looked at me and I said, I'm 70. I said, oh, you feel bad now. You feel bad now, don't you? And so he left, and he made me his tool clerk because having been in the trades, I actually knew what the tools
Yeah.
were. So he could say, I need this, that, and the other, and I could bring it out to him. And when you work in the trades, a lot of times you pick up a 5-gallon bucket and you put all your tools in your bucket and you go. And he had never done it that way. You know, people would come out like this, and I would just come out and hand him a bucket. He said, that's a good idea.
Okay.
I said, yeah, that's why people in the trades do it this way. But he really, really liked me. And my last day there, he said, when you're off paper, you have to let me know. That means finish probation. You have to let me know because I owe you a drink.
Oh, wow.
He was a nice guy.
I mean, you're painting, there's a picture here of prison. It's a relatively...
You know, it is what you make it.
Okay.
I used to tell people, I said, keep yourself busy. I did a lot of reading. I taught an art class. I did a lot of art work. They have Family Day once a year when they'd have these big scenes with holes for the kids to put their faces through, you know. So they'll have different themes. And the one year that I did that, I think it was Disney. So we had Finding Nemo and, you know, different things like that. And I looked at poor little Nemo and I said, Nemo looks angry. So this other woman that I was working with, she said, can you make Nemo look better? And I said, I think I can. So we kind of made Nemo look like a happier fish. But I learned a lot of artistic things, so, you know, for the big things, because, you know, usually you're working on a small picture, but I learned how to use a projector so you could actually do a big mural on the wall. So, yeah, I learned a lot of things.
Did you feel like you had gone through quite a bit leading up to prison?
Yeah.
Obviously losing people. While you were in prison, you lost your son. They let you come out for that?
No, well, I was out, thankfully. I was so grateful.
This was in that period when you were out?
Yes,
Okay.
during that 3-year period, I was so grateful that I was out because I had seen somebody lose their child while they were in there, and that is just
Horrific.
horrific.
So just so I have the timeline right, 6 months, then you're out
For 3
for
years.
3 years.
Yeah.
Readjust normal life, everything, and then, hey, you're going back for 2 years.
Yeah.
Went to Danbury for 2 years. And now you're back
A year
out.
and a half, yeah.
And you've been out how long now?
Let's see. My granddaughter is 6. I was here when she was still in the oven.
Okay.
So I think I've been in Brantford for 7 years.
Okay.
It would be in October.
You know, looking back, is there something that, you know, along those lines that you say, I wish I had done X?
Well, you know, every now and then I say, yeah, it would have been better if you just said you were guilty. And then I would say, but the one thing they can't take away from me is my integrity. So I have no regrets. I have no regret because I answer to a higher power and always have. And so, I mean, I'm not affiliated with any religion now, but I still have a higher power. And I still believe that I have had guardian angels with me my entire life. Never have I had to fight anybody. I only have to look like I will kill you and you won't come near me. I feel like I've just been protected my whole life. And that's why nothing happened in Alderson. I also had a situation in Danbury, if you have time for that
Go ahead,
story.
go ahead, yeah.
Okay. Another thing, Danbury was built for the 12 Watergate men. So there's rooms, and I was in room 8. And room 8, which was built for one man, had 4 bunk beds in it. And one time, it's supposed to be set up like the bus stop was in Alderson. It was just, you started here and then you got transferred down below to where they used to have a bowling alley, and now it's all cubes. This woman came in. She was sent from a higher security prison. It's like a step-down unit, right? So now you're at minimum security. And she was moaning and groaning about how her commissary hadn't come in. She didn't have any sweats. And I said, well, I have a pair of sweats that I bought for someone to pay them back because my co-conspirator arranged for me to have sweats when I arrived because she was there before me. And when I bought these sweats, I bought the wrong size. And she said, oh, well, that's my size. And she said, I'll buy them from you. And I said, fine. She said, but I don't have my money yet. I said, that's okay. When it comes in, you just pay me back. Just buy another set of sweats for me. Okay. So months go by, and she's not paid me back. And she's now been moved out of my room. And she's kind of a bully. So she's much bigger, much younger than me. She would like just walk down these very long lines to eat and say, excuse me, excuse me, excuse me. And she came to me and I said, I don't think so. I think you need to go to the back of the line. Now, the other women are looking at me like,
the hell's wrong with you? Yeah.
This is one feisty woman, right? But it just was wrong. It was really wrong to do that. And she did it every single time. But this is the first time she had to pass me to get there. And so she went to the back of the line. And that night, she announced to her whole unit down there that I had just sold my sweats for a slice of pizza, because that's what
she was not
pizza
paying.
Yeah. So the next day, so word came to me. The next day, I had been working on grounds, and we had mint growing there, and I would always pick some mint. I would give it out to my friends. We'd stick it in our water. We felt like we would have a nice drink, a refreshing drink. And it happened to be the first warm phase of May. And I'm walking out of the dining hall, and I said, Lakeisha, do you have my sweats? And she laughs, ha, 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 ha. And she's walking away from me. And I said, no, you owe me those sweats. And when are you going to pay them? She laughed. She said, she's laughing. She's saying to her friends, she thinks I'm going to give her those sweats. And she's walking away from me. And I'm like, this is so wrong. I took the lid off of my ice water and I threw it right on the back of her neck. And a little piece of mint was hanging off her ear. And she gasped and she said, that's assault. And I said, then I assaulted you, but you're not going to walk away from me when I'm talking to you. That's very disrespectful. You can't do that. She said, I'm going to the CO. And I said, I'm coming with you. So we went to this is the first time I've seen this particular guard. And by the way, there's only one guard, usually a man, but I think we may have had one woman at one time.
Okay.
And we called him Hollywood because he was just an adorable young man. And he's looking at the 70-year-old and this other young person who is probably in her 30s, twice my size. I would say the country girl versus the city girl, too, on top of that. And she's pointing at me. She said, she assaulted me. And I thought I did. And I said, I threw ice water on her. He said, that's assault. I said, I'm telling you, I did it, So he said, now I have to call the lieutenant. So he calls the lieutenant. He happened to be the same lieutenant that we had in Alderson.
Oh, no way.
Lieutenant North. Oh, God. Anyway, he comes up and he listens to the story. And he says, okay, both of you come with me. He puts us down in R&D. Now, R&D, they had rooms about this size with like a bench where they processed busloads at a time. We each had our own room. And it was nice and cool down there. It just didn't have a bathroom. And my accuser was having a bad night. And she was constantly calling. She needed to go to the bathroom. And she said, I don't understand why I'm in here. I'm the victim, So I'm just meditating, doing Pilates, stretching, whatever I can. And I would just go from one thing to the other. No clock, so we had no idea. No windows, no idea what time of day it was. And this went on pretty much all night long. And, one time, about the fifth time, the person came out to let Lakeisha into the ladies' room. I said, I really need to go, but I'm pretty sure that's going to happen soon enough, and you're in the neighborhood now, so I may as well just go. And she looks like so happy, like, oh, she's so considerate. So next morning comes around, they deliver your food. I mean, they put the tray right in there, And I got to eat the men's food because the men get, that R&D was in the men's prison there.
Okay.
The men get much better food than the women.
Oh, really?
Well, men are smarter than women. They really, no, I'm telling you.
You said it, not me. But
No, when it comes to this, men were smarter. They're organized. They stick together. They determine what they want, and they determine how they're going to get it. So if they decide that they're going to get better food, they will conspire together. They'll come together and
somehow
they'll make
manage it.
And they get better. Women, on the other hand, they backstab, and they don't stick together, and they're just like, it's like herding cats. So
Okay, fair enough.
that's, I can say that it's my breed. Anyhow, we go through the night. I was interviewed early on, and then in the morning, interviewed again, and they said, so, this is a serious crime. And I said, it is. He says, well, you hit her over the head with your mug and called her the N-word. And I said, I don't use the N-word. And I said, and I never hit her over the head. So that's a lie. And I think if you go to the CO who's on duty and ask him, what did she say when we walked in there?
So they had interviewed her, and
Yes.
she made up this additional story. That
Yes,
you had
and the
done.
two
Okay,
women that
I
were
see.
with her, one lies and the
Yeah.
other swears to it. So I thought, well, that is a serious thing,
Yeah.
That's serious. Now I'm a little more concerned, and I think I'm going to have to start thinking here. And I said, you go to the CO, ask him what she said, because I'll tell you what she said. She said, as she pointed at me, she threw ice water on me, and I said, I did. And I said, now it's something entirely different. And I don't know about you, but I think lying to a federal officer is a much worse crime than throwing ice water on somebody. And he's looking at me like, God, okay, we'll get back to you. So he comes back and he says, your story checks out. Other people witnessed that too. And so we're going to let you stay here. So I didn't have to go to Philly for 30
Okay.
days because they don't have a confinement for anybody. And I said, okay. He said, you just have to promise me you're going to behave. You're not going to start any trouble. And I looked at him. I said, no, I'm going to form a senior citizen gang and terrorize Danbury. And he's like shaking his head and sort of trying not to laugh. And he brings the other person in. And he said, okay, this is what we found out. This is what we're going to do. You ladies, you just stay out of each other's way and, make nice. I think you owe her the sweats, but, that's actually against prison rules.
Yep.
So we're not going to get involved in that. So I ended up staying there, and so did she. And about a week or so went by, and I was walking down the hallway, and I hear somebody yell, "Hey, Platt." And I looked up, and there's this woman who was a head of a drug cartel who had just come back from Philly where she had to do 30 days of confinement. She said, "I heard about you in Philly." I'm like, what? She said, "I respect people that stick up for themselves." And I never had any trouble with anybody after that. Because they knew, I said, my father taught me one thing. There's only one time that I complained about my sister beating me up. And he said, well, you just have to hurt her. You don't have to win. Just make it so bad that she's not going to want to do this to you again. And I said, okay, so I didn't have to worry about winning. I only had to worry about hurting her. You see, if I made it so bad, she would not want to come back at me.
So Jill Platt is a name associated with being a prison badass.
Yes.
In multiple prisons. So you've got West Virginia, Danbury, Philly.
It's funny.
And that's how you're known.
And I said, listen, just call me the Viking bitch because that's, Norwegian, German, Swiss, Danish.
So if you had told the prosecutor when this was being sentenced that you were about to become the Viking bitch of multiple prisons,
yes,
he might have said, let's hold off on this.
Well, no, he'd probably send me to a bigger prison. More security there. But I never had any problems. And when the counselor called me and she said, how's it going out there? And I said, hey, I'm in the right place for bad behavior.
Wow.
So I behaved badly and they seemed to like it. So
it certainly seems like you made the best of a bad situation.
Oh, absolutely.
And you
Yeah.
have, I mean, the person in front of me now is a incredibly positive person. The person I talked to before the podcast was an incredibly positive person. That's kind of jumping out at me. Did everybody have the same experience? It was
Oh, no.
no. Okay, so
No.
so your co-conspirator did not have the
No,
same
she
experience.
she hired protection
Oh, really? Okay.
in Alderson. Yeah, she was very concerned. She was being bullied. Now her job, she got to work in the gym, and that's where all the he-she's went to work, as we called them.
Okay.
And she wasn't a he-she, so she just went there because she enjoys working out, unlike me. I avoid that like the plague. But no, she enjoys working out. She thought, well, that would be a good job, but
Wasn't a great fit.
So no, there's a lot of chest bumping and head bumping and whatever. But she's not happy there. She was concerned, and so with commissary, she could hire somebody to be her bodyguard.
And so once you got out, she had another 2 years to go.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Talk to me about getting out.
Well, that was interesting too because I got into civilian clothes for the first time in a while. My son picked me up to bring me to the airport because I was doing my halfway house in Florida in Fort Myers, and he gave me my old cell phone, which is why I had a smartphone. And I was grateful because I had GPS, so I could actually, because we had to walk everywhere, and it could tell me where I
You
could
were
get
not
to my
supposed
bank.
to have a smartphone.
No, we're not supposed to have any internet connections. And so when I got caught with it, I said, would you explain to me why I can have, and I had the other phone, the flip phone that they allow you to have, right? Why this phone is okay, but this phone isn't okay? And they said, well, this phone, you could contact your friends and arrange for a break. You could find out where the police were and everything. And I said, oh, and this phone, I could call my friends
At this
and
point,
ask them
how
where
old
they
is it?
are.
You were 70 when you went in? Or during?
I turned 70 in Danbury.
So now you're 71, 72 years old,
71,
and they're
yeah.
worried about you breaking out of Florida with a smartphone.
Yeah, a halfway house.
I mean, I understand why these rules exist.
No,
but sometimes,
that's a dumb
yeah,
rule. That's just a dumb rule because, I mean, if you have a friend, you just call the friend who
Yeah.
has the smartphone, and he can tell you exactly where all the
Yeah,
police
yeah,
are.
that's true.
It just made no sense. I said, listen, I only have this because I don't know how to get to my bank from here without it. I don't know how to get to the CVS down the street without it.
So were you punished for that in any way, or?
Oh yeah, I had to do an extra month in the halfway house that took it away from my home confinement part.
Oh, okay.
So
right.
I was supposed to have 2 months in home confinement, and I only had 1.
Because you got an extra month there
Yeah.
over a cell phone.
Yeah, but that wasn't so bad because on home confinement they put these honking ankle bracelets on you. I'm telling you, bigger than your mouse. This box attached to a leg, and it never comes off. You have to shower with it. You have to sleep with it. And I would sleep with my leg hanging off the bed because just
Yeah, it's uncomfortable.
Very
Yeah,
uncomfortable.
makes sense.
Yeah. And I was in Florida, but I never wore shorts because I was hiding my ankle monitor with my bell-bottom
Oh, that makes
jeans
sense,
or
yeah.
wet flare jeans. And I looked like a normal person. I was allowed to go shopping. I was allowed, I think, an hour to go food shopping once a week or twice a week, something like that anyway. And I could request some other time if I wanted to do something, because I went to one of those art, it's like sip and draw kind of
Okay.
nights with a group of my
Oh,
friends
all right.
down there. I actually have a lot of friends down there because my close friend was a teacher, and she was also single, and she had a lot of friends, and was always arranging things. And I was a cook. I mean, I grew up in a restaurant family, so I cook a lot, and I would just prepare all this food. She would come home from work, and I would hand her a glass of wine. She said, "I love having a wife." So, by the way, that is kind of what used to be. It's no longer. The wife thing.
The wife thing?
Don't expect that if you ever get married.
Yeah, no, I don't think that's the way modern dating works. All right, so talk to me about back up to Connecticut. Did you hear from other people in your gifting table group? Did they have they reached out to you, or
When I first came back, they had a baby shower for me for grandma because I came back because we were expecting my first grandchild. And that was kind of funny because, well, you know, my son, Chris, I'm down in the halfway house and I get a picture on my smartphone that I'm not supposed to have. And, you know, he's saying, Mom, you know, we think maybe you should come home. I said, okay, why? And he sends me a picture of the cat, right? And I said, oh, that's nice. Then he sends me the next picture and it's the sonogram. So I was like, oh my God, I got to be a grandma. I never thought he'd have any children, but Kim talked him into it, I'm sure. So.
And they have just one or two now?
Two now.
Just two now, yeah.
Yeah.
So now you have two grandkids.
Yeah.
Your son who passed away wasn't married?
He was married, but they had no children.
No kids.
He died at 34. And he was sick for 1 month, and then they couldn't figure out what was wrong with him. And finally, the autopsy showed that he had ischemic enterocolitis and 2 previous heart attacks that were undiagnosed.
Wow.
So my doctor friend in Florida said it was the heart attacks that probably created the
situation.
Yeah.
That's one hell of a journey.
Yes. But I've had some interesting interactions with Jonathan since his death.
Okay.
The little buzzing. I was having a massage, and I said, that buzzing is the weirdest thing. And the masseuse just jumped back, and she said, where is it? I said, it's right here. She said, that's a male spirit. And it was buzzing away. And she said, is it Ed? And it stopped dead. I said, no, it's gone. She said, is it John? And went, zzz, zzz, zzz. I was crazy. I said, oh my gosh. So she said, John, what do you want to tell your mother? And then she looked down and says, he said to tell you he's in a really good place and he doesn't want you to be sad anymore.
So
that's the first experience that I ever had with, I'm going to say, the other side. And as you know, as a witness,
yeah, I was just going to say, how I know you're no longer a witness is this story. Like, there is no question you are no longer a Jehovah's Witness. In fact, you're not disfellowshipped, right? Right. So if they heard that story, they might change their mind.
Yeah, they
not
don't
that
need
they
to
care
because
anymore.
I'm not.
You don't think they care anymore. It's a fascinating story, and it's amazing that you were in a situation once where you felt like you had to find a way to make some money. You heard about this story. Mm-hmm. You go to a party. Mm-hmm. The next thing you know is that you are making money. You do have people under you. You have a social group giving back some. You don't feel it's illegal.
Right.
It ends up at trial for a lot of reasons. It may not be reasons that may have done nothing to do with you, with agendas and political agendas and all that stuff. You go to jail for 6 months, 3 years outside of jail, thinking you're probably done. Go back for another 2 years. And now you're here sitting on the couch in front of me. And I think it's an amazing story. And whether you were guilty or right, well, that's for the listener to decide. But it's impressive that your mentality is that you still felt like you told the truth, you did the right thing. Yeah. And I see a pretty happy person in front of me, despite that experience.
I mentioned I have a friend, Jackie, who was running the Evolution Reentry program. She lives here in Brantford. Jackie Pulverati, and she said, with all the women that she has seen that have gone to prison, she's only met 3 who she knows were innocent, and I'm one. My co-conspirator is one, and then there's another woman who recently joined that rank. So she said, "There's no question in my mind that you are innocent women. You had no intention of breaking the law." So there's that is the primary thing, is the intention. Did what we did seem a little shady maybe to some? I didn't look at it that way. I didn't see it that way. I saw helping myself while helping others. And I did help others. And I had a good time doing that. And I kept my husband's health insurance up to date. And he had his prescriptions, and everything was going pretty well until this ended, and then he didn't have his prescriptions and he died. So there you have it. So I did what I had to do, and people can condemn me for that if they want, but it's a choice I made, and I definitely paid the price for that choice.
Well, I appreciate the story, Jill. I was fascinated when I first heard it, and I was more obviously, we had the witness aspect of it, and so many other aspects that are just fascinating. And I'm fascinated that you're not bitter. I don't see a bitter person in front of me. That's
No. I had a funny thing happen, if we have the time.
Yeah.
I was called for jury duty, and I kept reading all the reasons why you could get out, and I didn't qualify. I had been off paper. I had been out of prison too long. I wasn't old enough by 6 months. I think 6 more months, and I couldn't say, yeah, I'm too old. So I went to jury duty, and I'm sitting in the side chamber waiting to be called in for questioning there, and then the whole thing came about the other 20 people in the room. We started talking about murder on Middle Beach Road. Now we're all like, you're like this. And then I get called in there and they start, the prosecutor starts with the questions. Do you have anybody currently or has ever been in prison? And I said, well, yeah. And I said, you may recall the gifting tables. and she has this moment of recognition. You could see it on her face. You can see the judge going, and they're asking these questions. Well, do you feel like you had a fair trial? And I said, I feel as though the problem was me because I was in a brain fog because my husband had just died, and I really wasn't capable of helping my attorney. I was just not capable. I said, it was months later when I thought to myself, wow, when they asked that attorney, blah, 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 why didn't you say this, right? Because the tax attorney happened to be dating a woman on the gifting tables, the ones that my friend went to, the tax attorney that my friend went to with 3 other women. So he did say he wished he was a woman so that he could join the gifting tables. He thought they were great. He did, say he was quite positive about the gifting tables, but when he got on that stand, he didn't say that.
Different story.
Totally different story. So I would have asked my attorney I had to hire a private investigator to find the woman that tax attorney was dating so that she could be called to testify about the tax attorney.
I see, yeah.
And I think had that happened, it may have changed things, but honestly, my co-defendant believes the fix was in, so to speak, that the person that was on the jury who was what do they call the leader there of the jury?
The foreman? The
foreman, thank you, was politically involved somehow. So she said, we were not going to get out of that. This is just what was going to happen. I don't know. I think that I've had an interesting life, and I have no regrets about any of it. It's made me a different person.
Well, I appreciate you coming on and spending 2 hours telling your story. I do appreciate it. It's a fascinating story, and I think our listeners will think so as well. And this was a story that kind of consumed the shoreline in Connecticut for quite some time, and then obviously life happened and everybody moved on, and now you're back in the area. So it's good to see. Jill, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on.
The pleasure.
And if we get listeners with questions or comments, I'll send those on to you. You can always respond to those as well.
Okay. All right.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks again for joining us on the Steve Mazzacane podcast. This should be live in the next day or two. And again, thank you very much.
Okay.
All right. Everybody else, have a good night.